In the Bible, as well as historical texts, are references to giants or beings called the Nephilim. In the Bible, they are called many things: the sons of Anak, the Anakim, Rephaim, but they are most notably known as the Nephilim. The origins of the Nephilim beings were from the fallen angels who originally came down to teach man righteousness on Mount Hermon. 200 of these angels came down, and as a result, taking on the form of flesh, just like Jesus did when he became man, they fell into temptation. Unlike Jesus, though, Jesus never fell into temptation. These angels, a few of the leaders, known as Samiaza, Azazel, made a pact together, and they decided that they would take upon wives of the daughters of man that they saw fitting. And as a result, they created hybrid species or offspring known as the Nephilim. The primary reason for the Nephilim was to corrupt the bloodline of God, so that there could not be a Messiah to redeem mankind. These Nephilim were also known as the seed of the serpent, and they're listed several times in the Bible as such. In Genesis, we see a strange passage. In Genesis 3:15, it says, "And I will put enmity between thee and thy woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." This passage is referring to a bloodline of God that will eventually come and defeat the seed of the serpent, the Nephilim. Now we can trace back the historical records in which it changes, and the story of the Nephilim and the giants is modified and changed. During the early church fathers, while monks were practicing celibacy, the fathers of the church decided that they would change the doctrine or the teaching of the angels coming down and mating with man. They couldn't expect the monks to remain celibate while the story of angels cohabitating with women and falling into sin. So what they did is they changed the doctrine and said that the reference of the sons of God coming into the daughters of man, the sons of God were actually the sons of Seth. And this completely changed everything at that point in time. And when we look at archaeological evidence, we look at the structures in Baalbek, the land of Bashan, the Golan Heights, as well as Mount Hermon. We see all of these structures and tombs and gigantic temples that were built supposedly for kings, and I think for Nimrod as well in one of the areas. In the Baalbek area in particular, one of the most impressive sites, there are huge trilithon stones, weighing some of them over 1,000 tons. Some of them we're not even sure how much they weigh because they're so massive. They've been cut, quarried, and moved miles and miles away, and yet we don't have certain crane machinery today that are as mobile in as much to move them miles away. We have cranes now recently that can move massive amounts, but still the feat that it would take to move these stones, these massive stones, is just mind-boggling. And when you look into the Bible, the reference, one of the main references, Genesis 6:4, it says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown." And we have other references throughout Numbers and Deuteronomy, as well as in Samuel, about Goliath, the Philistine, the giant from Philistine. Now when we look into the history of the Bible in ancient times, one of the objections about the Bible and God is that, you know, God is so evil. He wiped out other people that were around the Israelites. Part of the history behind that is that these people were evil, absolute evil in nature. They would offer their children up as sacrifices. They would eat them. there was just, the earth was filled with terror. And during that period of time, what you have to understand is that if you believe that there is a God and that there was a Messiah, the reason why he wiped out whole cities or neighboring peoples were that they were all evil in nature. They were the Nephilim. They were meant to corrupt the earth. And then in fact later on, God eventually sends the flood to wipe out the corruption of the Nephilim mainly. It had got so bad that only a few remainder people, Noah's family, were unblemished. But then after the flood, you have another strange thing where then again we have the Nephilim. What is believed by historians is that after the global flood, the fallen angels or other angels eventually came and fell into sin again, and basically caused another set of Nephilim. At this point in time, when David and other people eventually wipe out the Nephilim, Michael, Raphael, the archangel, and some other archangels are supposedly sent by God to round up those fallen angels, specifically the ones that came down on Mount Hermon, the 200 on there, and basically bind them in the abyss. So after that point in time, you have a complete change of what happens following. But in ancient history, the Greeks and the Romans talk about the Nephilim and giants that existed. Josephus, who was a Roman Jewish historian, talked about the history of the Jewish people, and eventually as well recounting how the Nephilim came about, and about at that period of time how they had the massive bones still on display for people to see, because they had been destroyed at that point in time. When we look around history around the world, we see other people who talk about the Nephilim. For example, there were certain native tribes who talked about giant Nephilim that would terrorize their people and carry off some of their clan members to eat them. As a result, what happened is they were fed up of the Nephilim. They decided that they would throw wood into a cave that they inhabited, and at that point in time they set it on fire, and they never saw those Nephilim again. One of the common things that people would do, holding up their hands to greet one another, is that at that point in time the natives would wave to see if the hands of the person that they were approaching had 6 fingers, because the Nephilim had 6 fingers, and by doing so, if they had 6 fingers, they would either run or get out of there. But certain customs like this developed because of that, and the particular giants that were around that area had red hair. They also had double sets of teeth, double rows of teeth, and so there were a number of ways in which they would determine whether they were Nephilim, because they were frightened and scared of this race of beings. And later on, in modern day, when some farmers went to look for certain type of fertilizers inside of the cave, that very cave that one of the natives wrote about, they found remains of giant bones there, and with red hair. So it's been verified through science and through history that these giants did exist. There is a prophecy through the Genesis 3:15 passage, which is essentially that David was the one who defeated the seed of the serpent in the natural realm, and later on Jesus would be the one who would defeat the enemy in the spiritual realm. And it doesn't end there, because later what happens is, after David slays Goliath, he takes the head of Goliath and brings it to his tent. Later, Jewish historians and rabbinical study talks of David taking that skull and burying it on a hill, the hill of Golgotha, which was later where Jesus was crucified. And what is believed is that Adam and perhaps Goliath's skull was buried there, and when Jesus was crucified, the blood that that came off of Jesus, perhaps from his heel, dripped somewhere onto the ground and eventually made its way onto Goliath's head. And now there's some other speculation on why the hill was called Golgotha. One of the other reasons is it is derived from Goliath, but one of the other reasons is that the side of the hill looks like a skull. So it's all connected in terms of that. They believe that perhaps it could be because it actually looks like a skull. And if you actually look at one side of the hill of Golgotha, it looks like a skull till this day. And so basically David destroyed the seed of the serpent in the natural realm, natural physical realm, and Jesus destroyed the enemy in the spiritual aspect of it. And he completed everything, and he died for everyone. So he defeated the demonic spirits, which are the disembodied souls of the Nephilim. And those spirits essentially roam the earth trying to possess human bodies because they no longer have bodies and they don't have salvation. And then when you look at extra biblical texts, you see, for example, in the Testament of Solomon, how he is given the ring of Sabaoth, which is the ring of the hosts, or basically the ring of the captain of the hosts, I believe, which is Jesus. And he takes this ring and he commands demons. But first he calls forth a fallen angel, one of the angels that was either kicked out of heaven or sinned against God. And what happened is he commands this angel to call forth his demon, his lower demon advocates. And so eventually these other demons come forth, and Solomon asks each demon, you know, what is your name, and who is it that you are an offspring of, and who is it that you are scared of, and who is it that can defeat you. And these demons go through who they were born of, and they talk about the particular angel that frustrates them or that they are scared of. And so it gives you a little bit more background on the Nephilim and the history all behind it, because the Bible doesn't talk too much about it, but during the time of Jesus they knew of these type of things. It was common knowledge and was passed down. It was a common day thing, so it wouldn't make sense for them to write it down. Archaeological digs and finds that we've had are absolutely fascinating. For example, Maximinus Thrax, Caesar of Rome, who lived from 235 to 238 AD, his skeletal remains were 8 feet and 6 inches. Around the Euphrates Valley, we found a 15-foot skeleton, as well as many giant tombs with other skeletal remains have been uncovered there. In 1577, we found a 19-foot skeleton under an overturned oak tree in Canton-on-Lucerne. We also find in 1456 a 23-foot tall skeletal remain around a river in Valence, France. As well in France, there was another 25-foot skeletal remain that we found in 1613 near Castle Chaumont in France. And history, demonstrates that we have in the past had giant beings living among us in ancient times, and it clearly it demonstrates that. So thanks for watching. Rate, subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, take care. God bless.